Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and it is a fabulous podcast Tuesday for all of you, because it is a fantastic podcast Tuesday for all of me. You guys are the world's greatest listeners, as evidenced by the fact that you have made us a global top 10% podcast. As usual, feel free to reach out to us here at the Buff, at Bufnagle, at bufnagle.com. I thought about that the other day. Does that make sense? It's Bufnagle at bufnagle.com. And I say at bufnagle.com. So I hope you can. The first name is Bufnagle, and then you have the @ sign, and then the bufnagle.com. So I think you can figure that out if you want to send us a note. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review. Remember to hit the like button, or the subscribe button is really good. The thumbs up button, the heart button. Don't give us the down thumb. That's a bad one. Any smiley star is great for us. That would be wonderful. And remember to tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode, and your friend will get a free episode. I always fail to mention that the episodes come to you free. So if you could hit that little button, that would help us a lot. And if you should desire to leave us a little tip in the tip jar, there's a place buried in the show notes somewhere where you can buy me a coffee, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much. We have 2 poems coming up. Why? Well, just because. That's what we do. Every now and then we'll do a poem. So here we have 2 poems coming up. I was going to do them. Well, they're related. Okay, they are related poems, I think, perhaps only in opposition to each other, but they both point to, I guess you could say, understanding your station, or your standing, or your place in the world. How do you perceive yourself? How should others see you? How are you remembered? What will you leave behind? Those sorts of things are in they're in these poems, all right? And I struggled with the proper order of these. Which one do I do first? Which one is last? It's one of them is shorter, one of them is longer, one of them is kind of negative, one is kind of positive, one is cautionary, one is uplifting. And which one do I do first? Which one do I do last? And with no real good reasons one way or the other, we will do the short one first this week and the longer one next week. I was going to do them both in one episode, but then it just got too long, and I thought that's not good. So first things first. This week we will do the first one, and next week we will do the second one. We have talked. We do talk. We are talking sometimes. We've talked about Percy Shelley before, romantic poet. Mostly, we talked of him with regards to Frankenstein, which was written actually by his wife. You can see episodes 160 or 263 for the redrop. It's considered a Bufnagle classic. Shelley's wife wrote Frankenstein after a challenge from Lord Byron in 1816. It was first published in 1818 anonymously, and then eventually her name got on it. As it should. When you write something, you got to put your name on it. That was 1816 timeframe. Now, while all this was happening, where Mary Shelley was busy upstairs in the attic writing Frankenstein and dreaming about animating corpses and the perils that come with that, well, this was happening. Percy Shelley's friend Horace Smith was staying with the Shelleys during the Christmas season of 1817. So right in the middle of this writing of these things all come together. And I think that's, it's taken me a couple of years. And if you listen to the Buff, eventually all of these pieces tie together into this big web of stuff. And it takes a while to get to know these things in the sense that they all fit in how they fit together. But if you keep going, eventually you will start to see the connections in these things. And the time wise or location wise or topic wise, you will see how these things all go together. So Frankenstein ties into today's episode at least temporally. All right. So Shelley's friend Horace Smith was staying with them, and during discussions one evening, they were discussing the recent discoveries in East Asia. So they're living in either in England or outside of Zurich or wherever they were at the time. They were talking about what's happening in East Asia. Now, Napoleon had recently, in the last 20 years, had gone into Egypt, and Napoleon was a big Egypt guy, and there were all sorts of Napoleon things in the late 1700s, and archaeology was flourishing in this early 1800s time frame, and they were finding all sorts of wonderful things, and it was part of the zeitgeist. The spirit of the age was to discuss all these old empires that were being rediscovered. So Egypt, at one time so very mighty and powerful, seemed as though it should last forever. But now it was, when Shelley was writing this, it was just in ruins. It was just a whisper of its former glorious self. So Shelley and Smith were both aware of an historian named Diodorus Siculus, who had discussed, back in Roman times, he was a Roman guy, he had discussed a statue of Ozymandias. Okay, so that's Ozymandias, Ozymandias. He's most commonly known as Ramses II. He was a pharaoh in Egypt. Ramses II is sometimes considered to be the pharaoh in the book of Exodus, the pharaoh from whom Moses led the Jews out of bondage. You know that. I'm going to say you know that story. I don't want to mock you if you don't know the story, but if you do, then we'll do an episode on that. If you need to be brushed up on that, I think you probably know the story. Let my people go, right? That sort of thing. The 10 plagues: water turned to blood, frogs, gnats, flies, pestilence, boils, hail and fire, locust, darkness, and finally the death of the firstborn, and the subsequent story of Passover, and then the Exodus. Okay, and it's where the book gets its name. So I'm getting the feeling we probably should discuss that as an episode. So we'll put that on the list somewhere to get our heads around the idea of Exodus. If you've seen the movie The Ten Commandments, the Cecil B. DeMille movie, The Ten Commandments, Yul Brynner plays Ramses II. That's the guy, right? That's Ozymandias, Ramses II. The historian, Diodorus, discusses this guy, okay? And he discusses a statue of Ozymandias, Ramses II, with an inscription, okay? And Diodorus Siculus, I guess I'll call him Siculus, right? He wrote that there was an inscription on the statue, or at the base of the statue, that said something like, "King of kings, Ozymandias am I. If any want to know how great I am and where I lie, let him outdo me in my work." And that's what the inscription said. It's very bold, very braggadocious kind of statement. And of course, the statue and the inscription are no longer around. Siculus only wrote about them. He obviously didn't take any photographs. So neither Shelley nor Smith had actually seen the statue or seen the inscription. But regardless, both Shelley and Smith wrote sonnets based on this tidbit of information from Siculus. Smith wrote a now forgotten poem, a gem entitled "On a Stupendous Leg of Granite, Discovered Standing by Itself in the Deserts of Egypt, with the inscription inserted below." Okay, that was the name of his poem. That's longer than some of the poems I write myself. "On a stupendous leg of granite, discovered standing by itself in the deserts of Egypt, with the inscription inserted below." That was the title. All right, and Smith wrote that, and now it's kind of a forgotten poem. Shelley wrote one called simply Ozymandias. It goes like this. "I met a traveler from an antique land who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed." And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Okay, well, that seems rather sad. Let's go through this and see what it tells us, or what it doesn't, or how to translate it. There weren't very many really big words in here, but we'll make sure we get them all covered. Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Okay, so they're just legs. Imagine a big statue of a big guy, and now it's just the legs. The legs are standing. There's no trunk. There's no torso. There's no head. There's no arms. Just some big legs standing in the desert. And I kind of imagine them kind of half covered, like the feet covered up with sand, or maybe they're not even up to the hips. Maybe it might even just be to the knees. There's just some legs, big legs. They're obviously human legs, but that is all that's standing anymore in the desert. And near them, we find, half buried in the sand, a shattered visage, a broken face, or an image, or some sort of we find the face. We find the front part of the person. Something that identifies the person, the image of the person there, and on that face we find a frown, a wrinkled lip, and a sneer of cold command. So this is not it's not a face of joy. It's not a face of calm or of peace. This is a face of disdain, of authority, of cold, ruthless power. This is the depiction of the person whose legs are still there. The visage, the face, the broken face of the person. The image of that is still showing, and all we see is a frown, a wrinkled lip, and a sneer of cold command. Shelley says that these details reveal that the sculptor must have been pretty good. That he captured these features of the person whose face this is. The sculpture well those passions read, or he read those passions well. So he read what was on the face of the man, and he put it well into the statue, into the sculpture. So the sculptor is he's pretty good. Shelley is saying that the sculptor did a good job of capturing the image of the guy in the sculpture. He adequately read the disdain and the authority and the power of the man, and he copied them accurately onto the face of the statue. And Shelley roundaboutly notes that what survives is not the work of the man, the guy whose image the statue is. His work does not survive, but the work of the sculptor, the guy who created the image of the man, the man whose hand has mocked that frown and the wrinkled lip and the sneer of cold command of the king, that does survive. That the work of the sculpture, the sculptor, his work seems to survive, at least in some sense. The visage that he made of that man survives. That's the way that the sculptor survives as well. If not better than the king, he's just as well. The king's gone, and all that's left of him is none of his work survives for the king. But for the guy who made the statue, his work survives, at least part of it, kind of broken, but it's still there. So the sculpture is kind of mocking the king in a certain sense. All that's left of the king is the emotion tied to his tyranny and depicted on the face. The sculptor is still, even in a ruined statue, able to mock the despotic emotions of the tyrant. In a certain sense, the sculptor is getting the last word on the king. He's mocking him from the grave, which is kind of, to me, is an interesting thing because they're both dead. There's, what does Cain say? That in the long run, we're all dead, right? So those guys are both dead, but the sculptor had the last word. And then we get to the inscription, which is the great part of this. It says, look how great I am. Look how wonderful I am. Just look around at all these great things I've done. You might think you are mighty, haha, but look at me and despair. This is chest thumping. This is self-aggrandizement. This is braggadocio. This is the word that comes to mind here for me, and I think it's at least pretty close to right. It's hubris. It's this thinking somehow that you are more than you are. They say Father Time is undefeated, and here's another example: a great king, great works, a great statue, and now what remains? 2 trunkless legs, a broken face that holds scorn, a sculptor who mocked you on your way out the door. Shelley calls it a colossal wreck, the lone and level sands that stretch far away. How far do the sands go? The sands are boundless and bare. There is essentially nothing left of the king. And all that does remain is just dry, empty dust and a mocking memory. Oh, what a great king you are. Whenever I read things like this, right, and in particular, I get to that last line, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. And I've seen that quote, the lone and level sands stretch far away. I've heard people say that, talking about how vast a wasteland is. And that's a quote that you feel free to use. And if you say that and somebody else has been listening to the buff, you can give yourself that, that magical, what do they call it? The secret handshake kind of wink, where you both know the same thing you're talking about. The lone and level sands stretch away. Whenever I hear that or read that, I think of a line from Genesis chapter 3, for out of the ground wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. God says this to Adam, describing the consequence of his sinning, of his turning away. Adam does that when he eats from the tree. These are the words that get spoken to you on Ash Wednesday. When you get your ashes on your forehead, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And I'm constantly saddened and amazed that this hubris story seems to be repeated and relearned, and is repeated and needs to be relearned by everyone in every generation. This is a thing that is a human desire, is to be this hubrical. I don't know what the word is. To be hubrisable, hubrisy. I see young men. I see mostly in young men, but you can see it all over the place. Anybody who wants to create a lasting legacy for themselves. I see young men playing their, I guess, what do they call them now? Sports ball games, right? They have success, so they spike the ball in the end zone and they strut around, or they flip the bat after a home run in some sort of disdain of the pitcher, or they do a knee slide, and I think it's a jersey stretch after putting the ball past the outstretched hands of an opposing goalie, or they shake the backboard after raping the rim with the basketball. They parade about, hands raised, in an effort to extort even more praise, even more adulation, even more love from a screaming crowd, while their faces show frowns and wrinkled lips and sneers of cold command. Do they not know where they will be in a decade? No longer able to run like gazelles, and now watching other men chase the glory they once obtained. And a couple of decades after that, they will be in boxes in the ground with only stones to attest their existence, stones that the rain will slowly erode, quietly releasing the etched names to the ages. I see all this quest for glory, and all I can think is, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Well, Rafe, this has really gotten depressing. What do we do? I think there's a thing we do. I'll tell you where I think you can find it. Chapter 5 of Matthew's Gospel starts the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus teaches what is essentially the fundamentals of living the life of Christianity. And in here we get the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who mourn. We get the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, the merciful, the clean of heart, the peacemakers, and those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. We get all that in there. We get salt and light discussion. We get the I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. We get the teaching on anger. Basically, don't. On adultery, don't. On divorce, don't. On swearing oaths, don't. On retaliation, don't. And on loving your enemies, do. It continues into chapter 6 with lessons on almsgiving, praying with humility. We get the Lord's Prayer in there. We get discussion of fasting and how to be light and how to not serve money, but instead serve God. And in verses 19 through 21, we get this. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So there's your answer. Lay up yourselves treasures in heaven. Lay up yourselves treasures in heaven. Lay up yourselves treasures in heaven. I watched the birds outside my window, the ducks and the geese on the pond and the flowers and the trees waving in the breeze. And I think of some of the verses that follow that. Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? And then consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they toil not, neither do they spin. Your heavenly Father knows that ye have need of all these things, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added on to you. The only things that are going to last are those things that are real, those things that are true and good and beautiful. The civilizations you build, the temples you build, the monuments to your greatness, all the things that you were doing, even recordings of this podcast will someday disappear. There will be nothing left here on the planet. Nothing but boundless and bare sands, lonely and level, stretching far away. You got to let those things go. You're not going to win it that way. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. That's the trick to avoid ending up like Ozymandias. Godspeed, everybody. We'll see you next week. We will seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.